What's up, everybody? Welcome back to yet another episode of Go Talk with Marcus, presented by the Give Us a Shot Network. I know there is a lot of basketball happening right now, but the NFL draft was just this past weekend, and we got to talk about it. So once again, joining the show is Justin Marville, host of the hashtag thisJUSTin Sports Show, and there is so much to unpack. Lamar Jackson, after what feels like eons, has finally gotten paid by the Ravens, making him the most expensive player in the history of football. The Philadelphia Eagles have officially submitted a name change to the Philadelphia Bulldogs after this past weekend's NFL draft. Plus, Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Will Levis, Anthony Richardson, they have all found homes in the NFL. And as always, we are going to name our biggest winner and biggest loser of this year's NFL draft. All that and so much more next on Go Talk with Marcus.
Give them a shot to do what?
Justin Marvel, how we doing tonight, man?
I am doing good, and other than the fact that my Phoenix Suns are down 2-0, but nothing that I didn't expect. Like I told people, this matchup is not a good one for my Suns, especially when the worst center defensively in the entire NBA is marking Nikola Jokic. So, yeah.
That's tough. That is tough. You're not wrong. That is a tough life to live. Hopefully for the next hour, we can forget about your pains, especially since they're not playing tonight. But there is a lot to unpack. But before we get into the draft, we have to talk about what is obviously the biggest news of the offseason, even bigger than Aaron Rodgers being traded officially to the Jets. And that is that Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens have officially reached an agreement. And if I could find it on NFL's Instagram, I could tell you what it was, but they posted so much stuff over the course of the weekend. But yeah, man, Baltimore.
You want me to tell you?
It's a
5-year deal, $216 million with $185 million guaranteed.
Thank you. You are better at my job than I am. Lamar Jackson, paid by the Ravens. Forget about what this means. You know we like to talk about pressure on this show. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much pressure is on Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens for the next 5 years?
Let's say a soft pressure because he got his money. He's already got paid. So I'm going to say 5 to 6. The only way that the pressure goes up, or the only factor, is because you can't complain now because you got your weapons. So they went out and drafted arguably the second best wide receiver in the draft. They went out and got Odell Beckham Jr. They've changed offensive coordinators. So no, you can't have the excuse that the offense is stale. No, you don't have the excuse that you don't have the weapons to stretch the field. Like, you have everything. You have a top offensive line. You have hopefully a healthy running back in J.K. Dobbins behind you. No, we can only anticipate that you're going to get a full year of Rashad Bateman with those two wide receivers I just mentioned, a top 3 tight end in Mark Andrews. There is no excuse now for your offense not to be an elite offense right now. Like, anything that falls short of the Baltimore Ravens being a top 10 offense in the league, top 5, will probably rest solely on the shoulders of Lamar Jackson. Because with this cadre of offensive weapons, I have to believe like you're not going to be asking Lamar Jackson to do everything and be Superman like what Greg Roman asked him. But in terms of pressure on Lamar Jackson, like, as we know with professional athletes, the real pressure is to get paid. And, well, he is the highest paid player in the NFL. If I know the athlete that he is, and he wants to win, that's all he's ever said. So, yeah, he's going to put pressure on himself, but who's just been paid and being paid more than anyone else in the history of the league. So, what really pressure is there when you got your payday? I don't know.
You silly, silly goose. You silly, silly goose. You know, you can always rely on Justin to be optimistic about any team that's not in Green Bay, Wisconsin. You can always count on that. Everything that you said is 100% correct, and that is exactly why the pressure level is up to 10 for Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens. And I'll tell you why. Right? If you and Germ won't let us, and he shouldn't because it's a valid point to make. But if you ignore the fact that Lamar Jackson has been dealing with injuries ever since he's won the MVP, right? When Lamar Jackson plays healthy football, this is a playoff team. And we're talking about a playoff team that didn't have Odell Beckham Jr., who I understand hadn't played football in a year because of the injury, but he's still, of all the wide receivers that Lamar Jackson had to throw to, he's better than all of them, just already. That has obviously Rashad Bateman, who, as you mentioned, should be able to stay healthy now, who just brought in, I agree with you, the second best receiver, the best receiver in this draft class, not named Jackson Smith-Njigba and Zay Flowers. And they still have Mark Andrews, and they still have one of the better units and one of the better coaching staffs in football, despite the departure of Greg Roman in the offseason. Lamar Jackson wanted his money. Lamar Jackson has his money. Shout out to the Ravens for sticking to their guns and not giving him the guaranteed deal that they said that they weren't going to give him. Props to the Ravens for that. But all the pressure is on Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. Because here's the deal. Dare I say, from an offensive standpoint, this team now offensively has the firepower to compete with their division rivals, Cincinnati Bengals, who have been to 2 consecutive AFC Championship games and a Super Bowl. The Ravens haven't been to any of those things since Lamar's been quarterback. They're able to now compete with Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills, who have also been to an AFC Championship game since Lamar Jackson's been in Baltimore. And they've won some playoff games as well. And although they're the best team in football, at least in the AFC, they've got the offensive firepower to hang with the Chiefs, which, here's the other thing too, Lamar Jackson has beaten the Chiefs without the offensive firepower that they've now added to the roster. Lamar Jackson, when he was drafted, as all players do, Lamar Jackson, when he was drafted, Deion Sanders asked him, how does it feel to be the last quarterback drafted and the last one left in the green room? And Lamar Jackson said, it doesn't matter because they're going to get a Super Bowl out of me, and you can believe that. Well, now, Lamar, you've got 5 years. The Ravens have given you 5 years, and they want a Super Bowl out of you. They were committed to you. Regardless of the disagreements over the money and the dollars and the cents, they were committed to you, and they've been committed to you since day one. They want a Super Bowl out of you, Lamar, and you've got 5 years to do it. Now, that's just the 3 top dogs in the conference. We're not even talking about an up-and-coming team like the Jags, who aren't there right now, but could be over the next 5 years in the thick of things as far as competing for a championship. I personally believe that this year, Deshaun Watson is going to get one step closer to the Deshaun Watson we saw in Houston, and the Browns could be a team to be reckoned with. We'll talk about them later on in the show, spoiler alert, but the Steelers could even be a team to be reckoned with, as they always are under Mike Tomlin. Maybe not competing for a championship, but a team to be reckoned with nonetheless. You've got the Dolphins in the AFC East. You have now the Jets, who have pretty much just turned into the Green Bay Packers East at this point. But the Jets are the Jets. Maybe there's the Chargers. Maybe there's the Broncos. This is a stacked conference, and the Ravens did everything over this last week and a half to commit to Lamar Jackson and to commit to winning a championship. Lamar Jackson, all eyes on you, bro. You got your money. Now it's time to go deliver that Super Bowl you promised back in 2018. And if he doesn't, that's not going to be a good look. The pressure is on. Luckily enough, pressure does 2 things. Burst pipes, make diamonds. Hopefully, Lamar Jackson can turn into the diamond that the Baltimore Ravens invested in 5 years ago in the NFL draft.
I'll say this, you're not wrong, but again, whatever that pressure is going to have to come from within, because like I said, the pressure, I know he would have felt the pressure of trying to get paid, especially while being hurt. There's no greater feeling of angst from a star player being, hurt while in a contract year. So I kind of feel like there's going to be a freedom. He's always loved the franchise. He's always had a great relationship with his head coach, who I feel has always been a top 5 head coach in the entire league. And I believe the roster is a championship-ready roster. How much will they be able to rebound from injuries? I don't know. And to your point, no, they've already been able to compete with Cincinnati without these weapons. We forget that playoff game. Baltimore really was giving them everything, even without Lamar Jackson. You are right. This is a championship-ready roster. Again, I just feel that the pressure has to be coming from within, and not from the outside, because I feel like he is one of those players who doesn't let the noise bother him, or he would have switched positions or be out of the league already.
And you're not wrong. And this is no hate towards Lamar, but this is just the reality of the situation. He's gotten his money. And now that you've gotten your money, it's time to produce. And I think the one thing that everyone wanted to hold on to for so long was that, well, the Ravens aren't building around Lamar. Well, they got OBJ, they got Zay Flowers, and they then gave him his money. So, not to mention all the other things that they've done over the past couple of years as far as what they've done drafting. So, they've gotten them some weapons offensively. That defense hopefully can be better this year than it was last year. That was not a good defense last year. Not bereft of talent, but they just were not executing last year. This should be one of the better teams in football. This should be a championship contending roster. It is a championship contending roster. This should be a championship contending football team. And if it's not, pipes might get burst in Baltimore. Let's move from one quarterback to who got paid. Let's go a little bit further up 95. Talk about another quarterback that got paid, who was the highest paid quarterback in NFL history, or player in NFL history for a week. Before the Ravens said, "Hold my beer, let's pay Lamar Jackson." The Philadelphia Eagles have officially submitted a name change request to the office of the commissioner of the NFL for their name to be changed to the Philadelphia Bulldogs, because in the last 2 years, the Eagles have drafted 5 former Georgia Bulldogs. Now, don't get me wrong.
6.
You're right. 6 former. Now, don't get me wrong. Georgia has won both of the last national championships in college.
5 or 6.
All of that chemistry is great. We've seen it work for the quarterback and wide receiver duos. They're hoping it can work defensively. The Philadelphia Bulldogs are the favorites to win it all next year.
Like, they have to be. I thought initially before the draft, right, that they had a lot of problems because they were losing a lot of players, and a lot of players along their key areas of strength, notably that defensive line. Like, if you look at the Philadelphia Eagles, they don't make any sort of qualms about how they build their teams. They build their teams from the lanes out, right? But then I forgot about the draft, but Howie Roseman did it. And to your point about going after Georgia, like, when you look at Georgia, and 2 seasons ago we said this was historically the best defense in all of college football, then it only made sense to draft from that pool, right? And what has Philadelphia done over the last 2 seasons? Drafted the 4 best players from that historic defense. When you talk about Nakobe Dean, you talk about Jordan Davis, and now Jalen Carter and Nolan Smith.
Yep.
It just makes sense, especially considering the strength of your 2 units. Forget, all these weapons that the Philadelphia Eagles have. Your strengths of this team are your offensive line and your defensive line. And now you've only bolstered it. So you have arguably, if not the best defensive tackle, the second best defensive tackle in Jalen Carter, who a lot of people feel it was the best player in this draft via talent. Then you've arguably added the second best pass rusher in Nolan Smith. Like, oh my bear, this is a team that just came from a historic 70 sack season. And now you've added these 2 people up front to a team that already has Fletcher Cox and Brandon Graham. And if I'm not mistaken, Hassan Reddick has not left the building as yet. So, this defensive front is going to be absolutely scary. And they have no significant departures on that offensive line. Jason Kelsey didn't retire. Lane Johnson didn't retire. And Jordan Mailata is firmly placed at left tackle. Again, everyone likes to look at skill position players. That is the strength of this team, the offensive line and defensive line, and you've only gotten stronger from there. Now you've gone after, like you said, another Bulldog in the running back from the Detroit Lions. And this is not just a running back, but this is a running back that can catch passes out of the backfield, and DeAndre Swift. This team I honestly thought that the offseason was so terrible for them up until the draft, and I was going to knock them a peg behind the San Francisco 49ers. But now they've only separated themselves with this draft. The strength of your team are these 2 things, and these 2 things have only gotten better with this draft. Mm-hmm. They are the favorites for me for sure. If they're not the favorites to win the Super Bowl, they have to be the favorites to get out of the NFC.
Well, they're definitely the favorites to get out of the NFC, but I mean, they're not the favorites to win the Super Bowl.
Well, that's fair.
As long as Patrick Mahomes is playing on a football field, the Kansas City Chiefs is the Chiefs. But everything you said is correct. And here's the one thing. I agree with you. I did not like the Eagles offseason to the draft. I'll be honest. They lost a lot of key players. And as much of a personal win it is for Jalen Hurts to have been paid, and you know how I feel about Jalen Hurts having been paid. It's not that Jalen Hurts isn't worth it, but when you look at who they have to pay, like Devontae Smith is coming down the pipe. I know that they all of these young guys that they've drafted, they're going to be coming down the pipe along the same time in which, listen, me personally, and I advocated for this, and you were there to see it, and you were there to read it on Twitter and things. I thought the Eagles should have given Jalen Hurts a Pat Mahomes-like contract, a very heavy front-loaded contract with a bunch of void years in the back, so that you're not trying to figure out and scramble how the Green Bay Packers have had to figure out and scramble how to restructure back years of contracts down the stretch after making really big deals. I've always felt that that would have been the best case scenario because you've got all these young guys that you're going to want to keep on the roster, specifically on the defensive end. Darius Slay is a prime example of this, right? Darius Slay was almost not an Eagle this season because of issues with being able to figure out what he's going to be paid. You're going to continue to have those issues down the pipe because of this contract. I understand that it's spread out evenly, but a front-loaded contract with a lot of void years I thought would have been best, but you can't knock it. Like Howie Roseman has beaten the bad GM allegations. These 2 years have completely eradicated the bad GM allegations. And that's really where we were with this Eagles football team, right? After they had decided to move on from Doug Peterson and then obviously move on from Carson Wentz as well. Like that was the thing. Like what's next for this team? Nick Sirianni was looking at is maybe like what's happening here? Is Jalen Hurts really the guy? What is Howie Roseman doing in the front office? And all Howie Roseman has done over the last 2 years is proven that he is great at his job. Trading for AJ Brown on draft night last year, trading to get DeAndre Swift this year, getting Nakobe Dean, getting Jalen Carden, getting Loading Swift Jr., drafting Keely Ringo later in the rounds, right? Bring in James Bradbury as a free agent off of the Giants, trading for CJ Gardner-Johnson last year for a bag of chips, if we're being completely honest, from the New Orleans Saints, excuse me. Like that is what Howie Roseman has done. He's beaten the bad GM allegations. They're the only team, if I'm not mistaken, according to Pro Football Focus, they're the only team in the last 2 years to get at least an A in both drafts. It's deservedly so difficult, and deservedly so. It is so difficult in this league to nail one draft. They've nailed two in consecutive seasons. So at the very least, I agree. The Eagles absolutely are the favorites to come out of the NFC. The Chiefs are the Chiefs. We keep trying to find new teams to give the crown to. We did it with the Bills. We've done it with the Ravens. We've done it with the Bengals.
I didn't give it the Bills. I can tell you that.
Well, you did, of course, but the masses did. We tried to give it to the Chargers for a little bit at one point in time. Like we Steezy and you tried to give it to the Broncos when they got Russ. So we always try. There's some people trying to give it to the Jets now that A-Rod is there. Like we keep trying to find a new team to give the crown to, and until someone actually takes it from the Chiefs, and the only team that's been able to do so has been the Bucs, and it's really just been Tom Brady because the Bucs haven't really been much of anything since they won that Super Bowl a few years ago. Like that's where we are. So the Eagles, what they have done is they have extended their championship window past just this season because of the way that Howie Roseman drafted this year. So 100% they're the favorites to come out of the NFC. And I wouldn't be surprised in the next couple of days we get an official announcement from the officer of the commissioner saying that their names are changed to the Philadelphia Bulldogs and that their logo is going to be changed. We talked about two quarterbacks now that have locked in their long-term futures with their teams. There are four guys at the quarterback position that have finally entered the fold. Bryce Young was drafted first overall by the Carolina Panthers out of Alabama. C.J. Stroud from Ohio State is headed to Houston. Will Levis is headed to Tennessee. Anthony Richardson is headed to Indianapolis. Of these four gentlemen, which of these quarterbacks do you think is going to have the most success on the next level?
This is a joke, right? You're just lobbing this up for me just because you want to see me finally hit a home run. Like you've never seen that before, and that's what you want to do, right?
I would love it if you could do one here. Yeah,
I'm about to do it. No, his simple answer is Bryce Young.
There you go.
I mean, can we end the show? No, Bryce Young and then full stop. I mean, all right. not only did we know he was the best quarterback in the draft in terms of everything, where you're talking about accuracy, pocket presence, being able to analyze and dissect things before they happen, on seeing things as the play goes on, leadership, all of these intangibles that you cannot measure, that we continually try to measure. He has been put in a situation with, and understand this, a head coach that is a former head coach, a offensive coordinator or a quarterback's coach, a former quarterback himself, and then Jim Caldwell. So, like, you have, not only are you the best quarterback, but you have been put in a quarterback situation. And I'm talking about Frank Wright, Josh McCown, and also Jim Caldwell. What better area or group of coaches do you want to develop quarterbacks than those three right now in the NFL? There is none. So not only are you taking a young, bright man, obviously there are question marks about his size, and those are legit. Like, the kid is, what, 5'9" at best, 180 pounds soaking wet. But that's the only thing we have said about him. We've not knocked his accuracy. We have not talked about him turning over the football, because he doesn't do that. We've not talked about any question marks about his leadership or his ego, like with Will Levis. We have done none of that. We've not talked about his pocket presence. We've not talked about his inability to create plays outside the pocket. These things do not exist. This is outside of the physical intangibles. We have not talked anything bad about this quarterback. And then you give him Frank Wright, Josh McCown, and Jim Caldwell, and we expect this kid not to succeed. Yeah, that's not going to happen. And this is no knock on CJ Stroud. I have question marks about the other two. But not only did I know this was the best quarterback in the draft, but you have put him in the best quarterback situation of quarterback needy teams.
And here's the great thing for Bryce, because I'm 100% agree. The Panthers now should be the favorites to get Marvin Harrison next year, I would say.
Ooh, Marvin Harrison Jr.
I think that's exactly what they need. I know they drafted a wide receiver this year, and his name is failing me. I do apologize. I can't think of his name right now. But he was a wide receiver out of Ole Miss. I know that. And Ole Miss has provided some quality wide receivers over the past couple of years. Look no further than DK Metcalf and A.J. Brown. But I can't think of his name. But, like, they're in the running for Marvin Harrison next year.
And Elijah Morris.
Yeah. I think he'll do good this year. I think he'll be okay this year. Maybe. We'll see. But they're in the running for Marvin Harrison. Like, Caleb Williams is going number one. They don't have to worry about that. They could be in a position just like they were this year to win the division down the stretch, depending on, because the Falcons aren't going to do it. They don't have a quarterback. The Bucs aren't going to do it. They don't have a quarterback. So it's going to be between the Saints and the Panthers. And as big of a fan as I am of Derek Carr, and as much talent as I think exists, I think that last season Dennis Allen proved that there are some guys who are just really, really, really good coordinators and not good coaches, much like Nathaniel Hackett proved last season. I think Dennis Allen is in that bucket. He's a really good coordinator, not that good of a head coach. And so I don't exactly know what that looks like for the Saints next season, but it's going to be between the Saints and the Panthers. The Panthers are going to be in the running for Marvin Harrison Jr. And don't be surprised if the Panthers think they're too far away from getting Marvin if they make another trade like they did this year to secure Bryce Young, to secure Marvin Harrison next year. I think that's well within the realm of possibility. Bryce Young and Marvin Harrison Jr., I think, is the Panthers' goal. They'll do whatever it takes to get that. And if that means making another trade to do so, I think that's what they'll do. Let's talk about Will Levis for a second, because Will Levis goes to a team in the Titans that just drafted Malik Willis just a year ago in the draft.
Yep.
What's going on in Tennessee?
It's the same thing that happened in Arizona a couple of years ago with Josh Rosen. Like, and I love it. It is acknowledging that you made a mistake with Malik Willis and not trying to say, well, not acknowledging the mistake. So many other teams before would have drafted this guy and said, oh, man, we drafted a guy in the first round, we drafted a quarterback last year, so let's give him a couple years to work on it. But I love the fact that Tennessee has realized we made a mistake. this is not working. We need to find the quarterback of our future, and it's not Malik Willis. And I think the entire NFL public saw that in the couple of games that Malik Willis played. Like, I know he was a rookie, but you can tell when somebody does not belong in the NFL. And I don't want to say this, but I'm not sure that Malik Willis is a starter in the NFL. Maybe in a couple of years on the bench, we'll see. But he looked absolutely dreadful to the point where you saw Mike Vrabel was refusing to attempt passes. Like, it flat out refusing to attempt passes with this kid because he was so afraid of him turning over the football or not being able to push the ball down the field. I am not a fan of Will Levis, but I am a fan of them turning the page on Malik Willis, and I'm a fan of them saying, okay, we have Ryan Tannehill at the very least 1 year so he can sit down behind and learn. Our team is based on what we do defensively anyhow, so we're not going to put Will Levis in a position where we need him to put up points and win. He'll sit down, learn behind a veteran in Ryan Tannehill, as I mentioned, and the offense is a run-first and run-heavy offense anyway, so anything that he's going to do will be out of the play action or those naked bootlegs where he rolls out. And, like what Cleveland tried to do with Baker Mayfield a couple seasons ago, cut the field in half for him, make the reads easy. I think that's what they're going to do with Will Levis and gradually build him on, bring him along. Like, let's be honest. When you look at the roster is not one that is ready to compete right now. Like, you got rid of Bud Dupree, you've gotten rid of A.J. Brown. You're just slowly getting rid of these players. You are not in a position to compete right now. They're not aiming to get in the playoffs immediately. So you can bring along Will Levis slowly. There's no pressure on the kid. And especially as he tumbled up the first round, I think that may have been the best thing for him. Whereas, like, if he went 2 or 3 or 4, there'd be so much anticipation, so many expectations. Now the talk is, well, you're in the second round. Those anticipations, those expectations have fallen. I think right now he's in the perfect position. I'm not a fan of his, but hopefully the young man can do well.
The Titans are the Titans are going to go 3 in a row. They're going to draft the quarterback next year. I do not. You don't have faith in Malik Willis.
Nope.
So he's not going to be there past his rookie deal, even if he's even fortunate enough to get through his rookie deal, because he might get traded. Will Levis, who knows? There's always a quarterback desperate team out there. Will Levis, I don't think he has it. I don't know what Mel Kiper Jr. was seeing, and maybe that's why I don't have him in covering the draft for 40 years. And it's not just because I haven't been alive for 40 years. Maybe that's why, because I don't see what Mel Kiper Jr. was seeing in Will Levis. I don't. And Will Levis right now, he's giving me Baker Mayfield vibes.
Even worse.
Will Levis screams, there is an I in team. That's what he screams to me. Baker benefited from 2 things. He was successful in college. 3 things. He was successful in college. He won a Heisman. And the team the year he was picking number 1 really, really needed a quarterback in the Cleveland Browns. That's what he benefited from. Unfortunately for Baker, his I'm bigger than the team mentality ultimately got him sent to LA, and now he's in Tampa Bay. So I guess the Bucs do have a quarterback, but not really. Anyway, Will Levis screams that to me, except he doesn't have the hardware or the collegiate success. And he's going to a team just like the Browns, who, while they don't have nearly the laundry list of failures that the Browns did leading into 2018. They're not looking, like you said, they're not looking to compete for a championship anytime soon. That roster's not championship ready. That roster isn't even championship ready adjacent. Will Levis gives me Baker Mayfield vibes, and Will Levis isn't the answer. He's not the answer. And I wouldn't be surprised if come this time next year, we're back on this show talking about the 3rd consecutive year that the Tennessee Titans have drafted a quarterback, because I don't see it in Will Levis, and they don't see it in Malik Willis. So
I'm not a fan. I'll leave it at that. I don't ever want to come and say don't want to see young men, not do well. But again, I'm not seeing the success at the college level. and there are question marks about his leadership, his ego, his personality. And as much as we talk about all these physical traits that make quarterbacks, I've watched football long enough to know that that's not what really separates, or that's not what makes good ones or great ones. Like, it's everything else, all these intangibles that you just cannot measure. And if the reason he's sliding into the second round is because of those intangibles that you can't measure and you're already seeing it, then that is already a red flag. I want to talk about the other quarterback because at least Will Levis slid to where he belonged. I want to choose my words very carefully because my biggest issue is with Anthony Richardson. And don't get me wrong, I love the young man's persona. I've read some articles on him. I've seen him. Like, you can't help but not root for this kid. Like, this kid I love the kid already, and I don't even know him personally. But my issue is, again, I have seen quarterbacks enough. I have seen enough quarterbacks over my time. And the problem is all of the red flags you have with Anthony Richardson are the traits that make good quarterbacks. I don't know at what stage are we going to stop falling in love with quarterbacks' physical traits. So all you hear about Anthony Richardson is how fast he runs. He ran a historic 40 for a quarterback. How big his arm is, and how the ability to make off-platform throws, etc., etc. But when you look at college, his turnover rate was high. His completion percentage was way low. Like, we're talking about historically low, like really, really bad. And one of your teammates was on my show talking about it in G.O.A.T. Like, his inability to complete swing passes or passes in the flat was historically bad. And if you can't make passes in the flat, if you can't make swing passes, if you can't make screen passes, like, what are you in the NFL? And I've seen some of his mechanics, and they want cleaning up in the worst way possible. Like, his planting his front foot, his left leg, and the speed in which he does it, and his over rotations on his hip, doing it is bad. It is really, really bad. And I don't know at what point are we going to stop drafting quarterbacks because they're physical marvels instead of just looking at what they're doing between the ears or what they're doing on the field in terms of protecting the football or diagnosing plays quickly. None of the traits that make great quarterbacks I am going to attribute to Anthony Richardson. And I hate to see it because I want to see Anthony Richardson do well. I really, really do. But the Colts I think the Colts picking him at 4 is you're going to put this boy in bust category with this situation because I don't know that you have the coaching staff to fix this kid, and this kid needs a lot of fixing, and not this, that. He's only had 13 starts at college with all of these problems. I don't know.
Would you have rather them take Will Levis?
I would rather them wait till next season and get Caleb Williams. I wouldn't, like, as a Colts, I would have bypassed these 2 kids.
I understand the thinking. I think when you look at this from the Colts perspective, you're talking about a guy in Matt Ryan who was supposed to come in and be serviceable, and he was not. He was supposed to be an upgrade from Carson Wentz last season. He was not. Sam Ehlinger didn't play that great when he played. If he did, we wouldn't have seen Matt Ryan come back on the field after he was benched for Sam. You cannot put that product back on the field. Sam is not, and I loved Sam Ehlinger coming out of college, coming out of Texas, but Sam demonstrated in the game that he played, or the games that he played, that he wasn't ready. Matt Ryan's only a year older. If we weren't satisfied, if the Colts weren't satisfied with what they saw last year from Matt, they weren't going to be satisfied with what they saw this year. Unfortunately for the Colts, they chose to not be aggressive. They chose to see what's going to happen. They had already accepted defeat. They didn't attempt to make any kind of and here's the thing. If I'm the Colts, once you see the Panthers trade for 1, there's something I can do, because the Texans were going to take a quarterback.
Well, you see, I think so. I've had this theory on my show, right, where I believe the whole issue with people like C.J. Stroud and Justin Fields is that these teams are intentionally trying to sabotage their draft prospects of getting them to fall to a spot where they can get them. And I think what happened, I think the Colts were in love with C.J. Stroud. Like you said, they weren't aggressive enough. And I think they were hoping that Houston were going to take somebody like Will Anderson or Slate out of that spot. And that's what you started to hear. Remember, right up to draft, C.J. Stroud looked like Teflon Don. And then all of a sudden, you're hearing this situation about he tested poorly at whatever that precognitive test was. And then you're hearing he missed a thing at the Madden camp. Like, who cares? Wait, is that a thing? And I find it weird that was coming out a week before the draft. Like, where's all this coming from? No. And I honestly think it might have been the Colts. It might have been the Commanders who were trying to force C.J. Stroud down. Because I can tell you this. Had Houston not drafted him, he was not getting past the Colts. I can assure you of this. And I think it's a situation where the Colts did not get their guy in C.J. Stroud. And they say, well, let's take the next best thing. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong in being bad for another year, having a bridge veteran quarterback, and then going to get Caleb Williams next year. Like,
bridge veteran quarterback wasn't playing like a bridge veteran.
No, you trade and get another one.
They can't afford to trade. They're in the middle of a rebuild. They can't afford to trade anything. Like that's the tough thing is when you are in the. So I don't like half rebuilds. I don't.
Me either.
I've never liked half rebuilds. Either you're rebuilding or you're not. That is partially my beef with the Saints right now. Is they keep teasing a rebuild and they go sign a guy like Derek Carr. Nothing wrong with Derek Carr, but you sign Derek Carr. Derek Carr is serviceable. You better be competing for a playoff spot now. And if you're not, blow it up. But you can't because you just signed Derek Carr. The Indianapolis Colts, when Andrew Luck retired, forced into a rebuild. Unmistakable. And they were doing okay. And they had Phillip Rivers. And they just missed the playoffs.
No, they actually got into the playoffs.
I'm sorry, they made the playoffs. And they go get Carson Wentz. And it's like, man, you made the playoffs with Phillip Rivers. You got to make the playoffs with Carson Wentz, especially because Frank Reich's there. He played terrible. He's gone. He's in D.C. now. They'll get Matt Ryan, who had a better season in Atlanta with nothing than Carson Wentz did in Indianapolis with the playoff roster. He gets to Indianapolis. His career is dead. Matt Ryan is not going to be better this season than he was last season. He's not. He's just not. And I love Matt Ryan. He is not. And if he is better, it's going to be marginal. It's not going to be to the point where you're thinking the Colts are going to be competing for a playoff spot. If you're the Colts, you have to make a decision. You have to. You either draft Anthony Richardson or Will Levis and hope that there's something that you can cultivate in this year to key on and build around, or you don't draft anybody and you stick to Matt Ryan. Here's the problem with sticking with Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan was benched last year for Sam Ehlinger, and then Sam Ehlinger was benched again for Matt Ryan. So clearly what the Colts told us last season was Matt Ryan wasn't cutting it. They then told us that even though Matt Ryan isn't cutting it, Sam Ehlinger's not cutting it either. You cannot come into this season after having put on Broad Street that the two guys you have on the roster to be your quarterback you don't think are good enough, and then waltz into another season with those two guys on the roster. You just can't do it.
I agree with you.
Unfortunately for the Colts, they weren't aggressive enough. They didn't go get the first overall pick so they can get a Bryce Young or a C.J. Stroud. The Texans weren't going to move off of 2 because they wanted whoever the first pick didn't take. So they weren't moving off of 2. The Cardinals were never going to take a quarterback, which is why they traded down, but they shouldn't have. They should have taken Will Anderson at 3. That was a dumb trade, the dumbest trade you could have possibly made if you're the Arizona Cardinals. But then again, they're one of the dumbest reign organizations in the league anyway, so it doesn't matter. The Colts had a tough decision to make. Either take Will Levis, a quarterback with leadership issues that thinks he's bigger than the team, or take a guy in Anthony Richardson whose boom-bust percentage is astronomical, but the ceiling is such that if he is a boom, when we look back on this pick in 5 to 10 years, we'll praise the Colts for for taking the risk.
That
is unfortunately the position the Colts, and I 100% agree with you though.
I hope that's.
I think they should have been more aggressive. I think the Colts should have been more aggressive for one. I really do. Because Anthony Richardson, I love him. He's a great dude. He's super, super talented. I don't know if he's going to be able to thrive in this system. A new head coach. There's a lot going on out there, man. I don't know. But that's unfortunately the position the Colts are in. You can't put Matt Ryan and Sam Allardyce onto the field for week one because you already showed us at the end of the last season that they weren't good enough. You had to get somebody. Unfortunately, the front office wasn't aggressive enough to get the number one overall pick. The Texans weren't going to move off of 2. Moving up one spot to 3 wouldn't have mattered because the Cardinals weren't going to take a quarterback anyway. They had to take Anthony Richardson, who I think is better than Will Levis, but his boom bust percentage is astronomical. And the Colts are playing with fire. The Colts are 100% playing with fire. So we talked about Lamar. We talked about the Eagles. We talked about all the quarterbacks. Justin, who won the 2023 NFL draft?
I have 3, so I'm going to start 3, 2, and go up to 1. So, first, our Green Bay Packers are actually good. Forget everyone talking about this crap about Gwen, a first-round receiver. Stop it now. Do I have to go over the history? Jordy Nelson's not a first.
Emmett.
Pardon me?
Emmett.
I'll go over
it. Right. I was on an Instagram live with Emmett, and he kept trying to ask me who I wanted us to take at 13. I was like, as long as we get it right, bro. Emmett.
I'm going to show you. I know we talk about this, but Jordy Nelson's not a first-round receiver. Greg Jennings was not a first-round receiver. Devontae Adams is not a first-round receiver. Randall Cobb is not a first-round receiver. You have to understand 2 things. One, the Green Bay Packers do not value particular positions as highly as other organizations. And 2, we have a culture of developing receivers. You don't have to worry. So getting Jayden Reed in the second round was an absolute steal. This kid looks great out of Michigan State. I'm seeing separation ability. I'm not going to mention Devontae Adams' name, but that separation ability looks very, very nice. And the reality of the situation is, right, I'm not a needs person, best player available, but we did need pass rush. It was Rashawn Gary and nothing else. And then when Rashawn Gary went down, we just could not get to the passer. You needed one. And if Van Ness is indeed the best player at that spot, because people had him graded as high as the 11th best player in the entire draft, we got him at 13. I'm good with that. We needed a pass rusher. The best pass rusher was available at number 13. I am great with that. But then you sat down and developed, or you put pieces around Jordan Love to say, we are not going to let you fail. So not only did you get the most athletic tight end, but you get 2 tight ends in that draft to double down and say, what we are going to do, we are going to sit down here and live in run pass options. That's all we're going to do. We're going to run the football, and then we're going to play action fade out of these runs and make this passing game easier. We have Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs already. We're going to give you a slot receiver in this guy, Jayden Reed. We are going to build this team around you. Everyone is around your age and younger. We are not hanging you out to dry. But this is not a Green Bay Packers podcast. But I will say I gave them an A. I love those first 2 rounds for certain. I won't stay too long on my second best draft because we touched on it. Howie Roseman. When Jalen Carter falls in your lap at 9, forget drafting anything else. You're done. You've won the draft. How arguably, if he's not the best player in the draft, he's arguably the second or third best player in this draft. We are only talking about him sliding because of the car crash and his overweight situation. But no, because you have Jalen Carter, and then you get Nolan Smith, arguably the second best pass rusher in this draft, to pair with him. And you have 2 others. Sorry, you brought in 4 other Eagles that he has played with. So, yes, he's gone through a lot of trauma in his life. But no, you have his teammates to all put their arms around his shoulders. Hey, you're good. He is in a veteran organization that is winning with his teammates. What better situation could you want for Jalen Carter other than with a bunch of other Bulldogs? And there's no pressure on you because the veterans are still there. There's still Brandon Graham. There is still Fletcher Cox. you have put Jalen Carter in the perfect position. Howie Roseman continues to kill these NFL GMs. He's laughing. He's sitting on the poker table, just stroking his beard and just laughing because he is murdering these GMs. But the number one draft, they cannot get away from what the Seattle Seahawks have done. It just can't. I don't want to say it's because Stevie A. Smith is out there smiling and just grinning ear to ear, right? But when you get the best cornerback in the draft, you'll get the best, what am I looking at? The best wide receiver in the draft, get the best center in the draft, and arguably the second, if at least the third best running back in the draft. You've killed it. You've absolutely killed it. Like, you already have a great wide receiver tandem, and then you put the best hands in the draft in Jackson Smith and Jigba on that roster, and you have added another quality cornerback when your defense was all the problems for you last year. Ooh-wee. Like, yeah. John Schneider and Pete Carroll have done it again. They've done another Italian job. I have to give top credit to Seattle Seahawks.
The Seahawks draft was good. The Packers draft was good. The Eagles draft was good. But the Steelers won the draft, in my opinion. This is an organization that, since Mike Tomlin has been the head coach, hasn't had a losing season. This is an organization that has seemingly found their quarterback of the future in Kenny Pickett last year, and he played good ball.
I'm not a fan, but
I'm not either, but he played good ball. The things that the Steelers needed, they needed to fix that O-line. They needed to fix that D-line. They need to work on that secondary. Justin, wouldn't you know, with their 7 picks, they drafted an O-lineman, 2 D linemen, a DB, a cornerback, a linebacker, and the tight end I wanted in green and gold, Darnell Washington.
You don't like our tight end pick?
I love our tight end, but before the draft, I wanted Darnell Washington. That's all. When I look at the Pittsburgh Steelers, the one question we always have, can Mike Tomlin and the Steelers do it again? Can they do it again? The Steelers are not going to have a losing season this season. We knew that. The Steelers are going to be a playoff team this season because of this draft. Joey Porter Jr., first of all, has black and gold in his blood, thanks to his pops, Joey Porter Sr., who played for the Steelers. When you look at Darnell Washington, a freak of nature. A freak of nature. Wonderful blocking, wonderful run blocking tight end, an amazing pass catcher. They drafted Broderick Jones, one of the better O-linemen in the draft, and then they went heavy on the defense, which is what this team has always been known for. Defense, 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 defense. When you think of some of the most iconic defenses to ever step foot on the football field, a lot of those defenses that come up in that conversation have stepped foot on the field wearing black and gold for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This is a football team that is in one of the most physical divisions in football. This is a football team that is so well-rounded. This isn't a roster that pops out at you. It's not, but it's a well-rounded roster. And this is a football team that needed to get this one right, because whether we are fans of Kenny Pickett or not, Kenny Pickett, if I'm not mistaken, only lost 2 or 3 games as the starter last year. He played good ball.
They didn't win because of him.
They didn't win because of him. You're right. But that was with a terrible O-line, a not that great defense, and a shoddy running game with Najee Harris. They've beefed up the O-line. They've brought in a tight end. They've brought in help defensively. They already have the wide receiver core, and they've got Kenny Pickett. The Steelers, in my opinion, I think won the draft because they did exactly what they needed to do. When you look at the Eagles, for example, the Eagles were playing in luxury because they had just taken a trip to the Super Bowl, and all they were doing was just supplementing what they already had, right? When you take a look at what the Seahawks did, this is no shot to the Seahawks, and I have learned over the past couple months there's only so many things I can say about the Seahawks because I've been labeled as a hater. But whatever. The Seahawks, as phenomenal as they did, can only go as far as Geno Smith will take them.
Agreed.
And I am not afraid to say that I don't know if Geno Smith can duplicate what he did last season. I don't. We've seen
either.
a lot of quarterbacks have really good seasons and then regress back to the mean the next. Geno Smith could be the next quarterback to do that. I'm a Packers fan through and through. You know
and
it.
And as I told you, right?
Good, but there's not one bad pick for the Steelers. There are things you can look at and say, for some other teams. I think the Steelers won the draft 100%.
And I can't knock that. As I said, the only thing I am worried about drafts and needs is that I always like to see draft the best player available, and unless it doesn't really fit your roster, then trade back to where the drafting the best player available marries your need. And I say that to see, I've seen so many draft experts, quote unquote, like knock teams for taking particular players for needs. I'll give you the perfect example, and this is where, again, I'll pat myself on the back. A couple of years ago, right?
You're always looking for ways to pat yourself on the
back. That's nothing new. So, like, a couple of years ago, right, I remember everyone saying Dallas needs a corner, like, and they were picking at 10. And the hope or the expectation was to get the kid out of Alabama, Patrick Surtain. And I think Carolina, or is it Denver? Yeah, Denver got him. Denver jumped ahead of Dallas to get him, right? So they traded back and they landed Micah Parsons. And at that time I said to Neil, I remember Neil asking me, who's going to be the defensive player in the draft? And I said, well, Micah Parsons, like, duh. And he was like, but everyone's knocking his pick. Like, why did he get a corner? I'm like, because they got the best player in the draft. Like, we need to sometimes understand that good football players are just going to work. And that's why, like, getting the best players available, because no, we're not looking back and saying Dallas should got a corner. We're looking and saying Dallas got a steal in moving back and still getting the best player in that draft in Micah Parsons. And I don't think there's any question, unless Trevor Lawrence then continues his upsurge and becomes that. But we're talking his 2 seasons in the league, a 2-time All-Pro. Not a 2-time Pro Bowler, a 2-time All-Pro in Micah Parsons. So I say all that to say, right, like, I am very weary of teams aggressively attacking needs. Yeah, you have needs, you got to address them. But when the best player available is in front of you, and we as Packer fans know that, because we didn't need a quarterback in that 2005 draft, but the best player available was available at number 24. And, well, 18 years later, we're not.
We have one Super Bowl to show for it.
Yeah, well, it's a Super Bowl more than a lot of teams. So
it is. In life, there are winners, and in life, there are losers. Justin Marville, I think this should be another fastball down the middle, knock it out the park. I think there's only one right answer here. Who lost the draft?
Again, I hate to say these things because I like to give time and years before, because we're never going to know. But the Detroit Lions, good gosh. Like,
what?
Yeah, the Detroit
That's
Lions.
the right answer.
Pardon?
That's not the right answer.
Well, I'm going to tell you why.
Oh.
Because at pick 12, you took Jahmyr Gibbs, our running back. I have no problem with you taking a running back, because had that kid, Dejon Robinson, fell to you at 12, by all means take him. But Jahmyr Gibbs, a running back at 12, and then you go to position in Jack Campbell, who was not, I don't even think, projected to be a first rounder, and you take an inside linebacker. Look at the 2 positions you drafted in the first round, a running back and an inside linebacker. Like, how terrible. Like, and again, maybe you may feel with DeAndre Swift gone that these are needs, but these are 2 positions that have been so undervalued. Again, I have no problem taking a running back in the first round, but this running back has to be really good, like a Najee Harris. And right now, Bijan Robinson, who I expect to come in the league and be a top 10 running back immediately. So I had no problem with Atlanta taking him at 8. But Jahmyr Gibbs, like, this does not move the needle for Detroit. And Detroit was a team on the rise. This is a team that needed another knocking out of the ballpark type of start. And so many were sitting there at pick 12. Like, there are so many pass rushers that you could have added to that defense that needed improving. You could have added another corner. after you got rid of Jeff Okudah, like there were so many picks like a Christian Gonzalez. That would have been perfect. Again, like remember I tell you, best player available, tying in with need. And that would have been like two of those players would have been the best player available. You passed it Nolan Smith and Christian Gonzalez and other cornerbacks to take these two players. I don't know who else you have here, but Detroit was bad.
I think the loser of the draft is quite obvious. This is a team who, despite questions surrounding their roster, I think is still comfortably the best team in their division. Barring anything crazy happening next season, I think they're still the best team in the division. And we watched every other team in their division do what is necessary to close the gap. This team didn't. This team drafted players at positions that they didn't need to draft at, and they weren't the best player available when they drafted them. This is a team that has a very big question mark at probably the most important position on the field. And while they weren't in a position to address that question, they didn't do anything with the pick they had to address other things that they needed to address. The biggest loser to me is the San Francisco 49ers, because they watched the team that beat them in the NFC Championship game last year somehow get better. The 49ers, all they've done from the end of the season to now to get better is take players off the defense that sent them home last season. You look at the 49ers right now. You mentioned the Seahawks earlier. I think the Seahawks had a great draft. I think the Seahawks are in the conversation to have won the draft. I agree with you. I'll never say it openly to Steve, I guess. But still, I think they had a great draft. You look at the Cardinals, despite trading away the third pick, which I thought was laughable, they still did what they needed to do with what they got back to have a good draft. You look at the Rams. I think the Rams had an okay draft, all things considered. What did the 49ers do to continue to ensure that despite the question mark under center, whether it's Darnold, Lance, or Purdy come next season, being the starter, what did they do to ensure that the NFC West is still theirs for the taking? Nothing.
Not in the draft,
The
that's for sure.
Philadelphia Eagles made sure that everybody knew that not just the NFC East, but the NFC belongs to Philly. And if you want to make it out of the NFC, if you want to go to the Super Bowl next year or years after, you gotta come through Philly. The 49ers, we all recognized, are the second best team at the end of last season, the second best team in the conference. I cannot say for certain right now that the 49ers have done anything since they were sent home by Philly last year to continue to be the second best team in the conference. Meanwhile, the best team in the conference has only made the gap larger. I understand it's the 49ers, and they develop players really, really well, and they have that long history, and they are already a pretty solid roster. I got it. But they didn't do anything, and this is no knock on the players that they drafted. I wish all of them much success, and I hope they all do really well on this next level. But nobody they drafted is a needle mover, and all they did was draft for depth. There's no one they really drafted that you look at and you say, that is an impact player day one at whatever position. They got special teamers, bro. They got special teamers.
And I think part of that problem is their quarterback room and not knowing where they're going with that quarterback room. You see, it goes back to my Anthony Richardson situation, and you're going to ask me how am I getting there. I look at Trey Lance kind of like the same thing with Anthony Richardson. You got caught up in all of his physical gifts, his metrics, the big arm, the legs, his mobility, the ability to make those off-platform throws. And again, there was nothing other than the physical abilities from Trey Lance telling you that this kid is what, a great quarterback will be. Nothing like, again, no knock on Trey Lance, but why are you taking, and you gave up such huge draft capital to get him at 3.
Yep.
Just to move to 3 to get this kid, and now he's not even played a full season. Are you ready to move on from him? And I'm not saying you don't immediately acknowledge mistakes and move on. But the kid has shown you nothing, and already you're moving on with Brock Purdy. And again, don't get me wrong, I like Brock Purdy because he has shown you at the collegiate level he was successful. He does not have the physical traits, but everything I tell you that makes a great quarterback, I feel Brock Purdy has. But no, you are in flux in terms of this quarterback room. You're now talking about trading Trey Lance. You don't have any certain market for this kid because no one has seen him play.
Yeah.
No one wants this project right now because everyone wants a quarterback right now that can make them win. What are you doing? And I feel because of your uncertainty in your quarterback room, it has led to the uncertainty of this draft and what you're doing to fill out your roster because you don't know exactly what you have under center. Like, I agree with you. San Francisco 49ers were not good in this draft, but it just points again to John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan sabotaging their quarterback room.
This is the last season for Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch. They
may not be wrong.
In forth about this quarterback thing for the better part of 5 years. Either they figure it out this season or they both need to be gone. Because you had a guy in Jimmy G who, say what you want about Jimmy G, man. He was the quarterback of a team that took you to 2 NFC championship games and a Super Bowl. Like, okay, he missed a throw. Okay, he's always going to find a way to mess up. Sure. But he did what you needed him to do. He was there, and he was the quarterback of this team. And he didn't win you some games or the big games. He did lose you some games, but he was always available. Trey Lance, in his NFL career, has played, 3 games? Brock Purdy was there. Freak accident. He's got Tommy John surgery, but he played great. Didn't lose a game. Didn't lose a game as a starter. He played great ball. They have fumbled this quarterback situation almost as bad as the Ravens nearly fumbled their quarterback situation. This has to be the last year for Kyle Shanahan. It has to be the last year for John Lynch. If they can't figure it out, if they can't put a quarterback product on the field this season that will produce wins and put this team in a position to win championships, there's going to be a problem. Because say which one about Jimmy G, when he was on the field, the 49ers were in positions to compete for a championship. They did nothing in this draft to continue that. Every team in their division got one step closer. The team that sent them home last year took 10 steps further away from them. And now the 49ers are in no man's land. Because now you look at them and you say, are they the second best team in the NFC? Or is it the Seahawks?
I don't even know. Like, the NFC is... I don't even know what the NFC is.
The Vikings at the end of the NFC Championship game were undeniably the 1B to the Eagles 1A.
I don't know because...
Undeniably, they were the 1B to the Eagles 1A.
Do you think so? Because, like, look at the Vikings. Look at the Vikings towards the end of that season. Because I kept seeing the law of averages, if you're winning all these close games, are going to bite you in the playoffs. And the moment they played a playoff game, what happened? The one-trick pony that was in New York Giants blew them out of the water at home. Not even on the road, at home. Kirk Cousins, as you are so willingly or so eloquently talking about other quarterbacks, is not going to get better from here, to the point the Vikings know this, hence they have not extended his contract. Like, he's playing out the final year of this contract. This Vikings team is bad defensively. I don't know. Like, the Philadelphia Eagles are cleared away the class of the NFC. I have to assume because the San Francisco 49ers ended the year on that streak, their defensive line is great, their offensive line is great. that maybe they're the second. I just don't know after the Eagles what is the rest of the NFC. To be fair, they are the Cowboys there. But I don't know what the rest of the NFC is.
Dallas Cowboys are the second best team in the NFC, thanks to
that may be so. That may actually be so. I just don't. And even then, their best offensive weapon in Tony Pollard is going to be missing the start of the season. So I don't know what the rest of the NFC is after the Eagles. We may just have to talk about the Eagles versus whoever in the Super Bowl. That is where it may come down to right now.
It's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. It's going to be absolutely tough. 49ers lost, which, as a Packers fan, I love. But before we get out of here, Justin Marville, please let everyone know where they can find you and the hashtag thisJUSTin Sports.
I thought they would have found me in purgatory, but oh yes, good accounts. That was an awesome draft. So you're not going to find me in purgatory. You can still find me in Lambo. But honestly, hashtag thisJUSTin. Put in the hashtag. You don't want Matt Kellerman and his cold takes. You want the real and the first and the original thisJUSTin. So indeed, hashtag thisJUSTin. We are indeed every Monday night, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central on YouTube. We are primarily a YouTube show. We are not exactly what you would call a podcast. You can't go audio only and find us on YouTube every Monday night. As I said, 8 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Central for our short form content. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Facebook. Hashtag thisJUSTin. If you cannot find us, not looking hard enough.
Once you do that, come back here, subscribe. Or before you do that, whichever. Subscribe.
Yeah, please, before you do that, hit the link, subscribe.
If you want more of Go Talk with Marcus, subscribe to the Give a Shot Network. If you like more of Burton German stuff about sports, subscribe to the Give a Shot Network. If you like more of JT and the Don of the JT and the Don All Sports Podcast, subscribe to the Give us a Shot Network. If you'd like more of the High Spot Podcast, subscribe to the Give us a Shot Network. If you would like to see more and hear more of the Divide Live every Friday on Fox Sports The Gambler, subscribe to the Give us a Shot Network.
Do that.
Those are your options. Subscribe to the Give us a Shot Network. Now, as I've alluded to a couple times over the course of the week, this Saturday is Backlash. WWE Backlash. First time since 2005, a WWE live event will emulate live from the great country of Puerto Rico. And while Sal, usually my tag team partner for all things WWE, will be in Ireland, I'll be here by myself, flying solo, which can either go really, really well or go real bad.
I'd like to join you, but I haven't watched wrestling since the end of the Attitude Era, the best wrestling era of all time.
We'll talk about that another time. Either way, whether you'd like to see me do really, really well or really, really bad, tune in. You might enjoy it either way. I'll be going over the WWE draft. We'll talk about the new title that Triple H introduced last week on Raw. We'll talk about Vince McMahon being sued again. And, of course, who preview the full Backlash card, which I believed is headline, will be main evented by Cody Rhodes and Brock Lesnar. So if you want to see that, subscribe to the channel so you can tune into that on Saturday. There's a full slate of shows for the rest of the week. You can also follow Give a Shot Network on all platforms as well. And you'll be able to kind of see all the other shows and kind of follow them as well. But mainly and most importantly, subscribe to the Give a Shot Network on YouTube, youtube.com/Give Us a Shot Network. Or if you're already watching on YouTube, click the red button and turn on notifications. So every time one of us go lives, you can see it.
Attitude Era, guys. Best era of wrestling.
I mean, you could say that. I think you're right. It's not a wrong answer. I don't think there's a wrong answer to that question. I don't know. Well, there is a wrong answer to that question. The Hogan era was not that good. But anyway, for Justin Marville, the hashtag thisJUSTin Sports Show. This is Marcus of Go Talk with Marcus signing off. Thank you guys for watching. And as always, you guys enjoy the rest of your lives.
Yeah, I grew up in the Attitude Era, so I like it. So.